So you recently carried out a survey, I think, to do with ransomware, the impact of ransomware, which we're all familiar with. It's perhaps somewhat surprising. The survey seems to suggest that lots of people, despite it being in the headlines, or I won't say every day, but on a regular basis, a lot of companies are still unprepared. A, did that surprise you? And B, did your survey sort of uncover what underlying reasons there might be as to why people still haven't, got round to addressing it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the ransomware is still, keeping IT decision makers, awake at night. And unfortunately, despite organization being small, medium, or large, deploying, IT security type of solutions, so the prevention solutions, they're still getting compromised. And one of the reasons, obviously, there's multiple, but human resources, human errors. People do make mistakes, first of all. Obviously, the hackers are getting more and more sophisticated, nothing new there. Unfortunately, as well, whilst you're deploying many, let's say, prevention type of security solutions, still many organizations, don't pay enough attention to, patches, using the latest software, using the latest application version of what they might be using. And unfortunately, that's, there's still many software out there with vulnerabilities. And if organizations don't, update them, hackers will use these vulnerabilities to get in. Weak password management. We've been, there's a lot of privileged account management type solutions or identity and access management type solutions. However, not many organizations, or not enough, are putting them into place. Therefore, there's still, despite all of this security investment, which are needed, there's other parts of the business, of the network, or of the applications that are not up to speed with the level of investment into obviously IT security products. And obviously, obviously it's better to prevent than cure. And still many IT decision makers tend to focus on the prevention, so the next generation firewall, the next generation antivirus, EDR or XDR, and so on and so forth, and cloud access security, and these are all very valid investments. However, obviously, that, as we know, it's not solving the equation to protect your business or any organization from ransomware attacks. So it's having more of a holistic 360 degrees type of approach that will really help organization not getting compromised. And obviously one of the key elements of any IT security, what I would even call data security type strategies, is in addition to your traditional IT security solutions and so on and so forth. And as we've spoken before, identity and access management, privileged account users, password management, obviously strong authentication, multi-factor authentication is, no surprise, your backup, your recovery, and using immutable storage for storing your data, and more importantly, your backup data. And, this is where I guess organization needs to do a better job in terms of rebalancing their investment and strategy across the board. So it's not only about, hey, I'm going to get a next generation firewall or antivirus that's going to solve my problem. Well, no, yes, you need that type of investment and strategy. However, think about when the ransomware is going to compromise your data, what's going to allow you to quickly recover the data, to save money, not to pay the ransom eventually, is, backup data. So that means businesses really have to rethink the approach and really balance out investments, and I would say the overall data security, data resilience strategy between prevention type of solutions and the cure type of solutions.
Yeah, in terms of the survey on that point, I mean, did you uncover how good people are or not when it comes to, did they all say, yes, we have suffered ransomware, but no, it was great because we recovered in minutes and there wasn't a problem? Alternatively, it was a real problem? Just anything the survey uncovered about how easily or not people were able to recover any data that they'd lost in a ransomware attack?
Yeah, I mean, we, through this, worldwide survey, through the worldwide survey we conducted a couple of weeks ago, is actually the findings are that, only 23%, so nearly just under a quarter of IT decision makers that we interviewed did say they were very confident about, the ability to recover compromised data. So that's actually, it's good, 25%, but is it good enough? Probably not. And again, that means 75% of the respondees are somehow not really feeling comfortable or confident about recovering the data. And that means, in most cases, yes, any type of organization will have some type of backup and recovery, will have some type of firewall or whatnot. But what's worrying here is they are not confident they can recover the data. So one of the things, obviously, they need to do is assess the situation and so on and so forth. However, one of the things as well we find out is not that many organizations do test, their backup capabilities, and that's why probably as well they don't feel comfortable or confident that they will be able to recover the data. So the best thing is, well, first of all, assess what you do, assess your policies between your IT security, your backup and recovery, your patch management, multi-factor authentication, and all this, various elements that we covered a bit earlier in the conversation, and test it. It's like, actually we are in congratulations to England, being part of the Euro, Women Football Championship. And then it's like, if you take an example of football, if you put together a great, defense strategy not to concede goals, but you don't train it, you don't practice it on the pitch during the week before the game, well, how it's going to work? And I mean, it's a bit of a simple example, so to say, but it tells you all. I mean, you could have an organization putting all these IT security products together, but they don't really test an incident, being a ransomware or something else, a rogue employee, a hardware disaster, whatever it might be. Then how do you know if what you actually laid out will actually come together and enable you not only to protect your data, but to allow you to recover the data, meeting your recovery point objective as well as your recovery time objective. So so that's very important. But yeah, as you said, 23% of people who responded to the survey only felt confident about recovering the data, but the rest, which is 75%, is not.
And did the survey uncover, or just sort of anecdotally talking to customers, there are big numbers thrown around when it comes to the actual cost of ransomware, pure money terms, there's a reputation. I mean, did you get any sort of indication as to what impact ransomware attacks had on customers where they weren't perhaps as prepared as they might have been?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of obviously cost, there's some companies have been paying. Obviously sometimes you don't have the choice, and it's probably, unfortunately, the quickest, because they are probably not prepared enough. That means they have to pay the ransom to recover the data. So there's obviously a financial impact. And then secondly, yeah, I mean, from a given the GDPR and so on and so forth type regulations, or any internal compliance or industry regulating type of requirements, obviously you have to inform your customers, potentially your suppliers. So indeed, there is always an impact on the overall bottom line of an organization, whether you pay the ransom or potentially loss of or decrease in revenues because you're losing the trust of your customers and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the interesting enough, actually, to go back to the survey, 35% of the respondees had to pay a ransom over $100,000. Yeah, and then 20% were asked to pay between 1 to 10 million. So these are pretty serious numbers. And think about it, you are a mid-sized organization, with 500 employees, you might be doing, I don't know, 10, 20 million pounds of revenues. If you, 100,000, well, obviously the pound is stronger than the dollar, but, 80,000 pound or 100,000 pound or more type of ransom, can have an impact on the organization, profitability and so on and so forth. So yeah, unfortunately, we still see fairly big numbers out there and companies having no choice but to pay the ransom. And, unfortunately, that means they were, not necessarily ready to recover their data, unfortunately.
Okay, and maybe on a slightly more positive note, I think the survey discovered that the good news is that people are beginning or planning to increase their investment in what we might call data resilience. So I think that's, you mentioned security software. I mean, I'm always intrigued because there's so many security software products out there, but obviously I guess a few more maybe doesn't harm, things like training, there's managed services and all that. So just sort of what were the findings around that exactly?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously with the pandemic, that started, or with the COVID issues, restriction that started back in 2020, a lot of organizations had to, adopt, the hybrid, approach to the workforce, or at least starting with remote working and so on and so forth. So very quickly, they had to obviously deploy solutions to allow these workers to work, or the employees to work remotely. And then, security is obviously, a big part of that. So as a result, I would say over the last 2 years, yes, organizations have been all investing a serious amount of money or significant amount of budget into remote secure access type solutions. That meant as well increasing the overall, data security or data resilience spend. As we move forward, these organizations, we look at, how to get the best of these, extra, I would say, unplanned investment as a result of the pandemic 2 years ago, because yes, they did a fantastic job, especially with, the partners and the managed service providers out there to quickly react to something that, was obviously unplanned. And then business continuity is always about, planning for the unplanned. But however, they reacted very quickly to make sure that, they could keep up the momentum, make sure that the employees could access the corporate, application and resources, remotely. And therefore, yes, they have obviously invested into, data resilience type solutions, which meant, again, prevention with IT security, maybe a bit more on the backup side of things as well, because, employees were probably, some of them were using personal devices. And if the organization decided that, the data had to be backed up locally, then yeah, they were definitely an extra investment. So I would say the pandemic has accelerated some of the investment that were probably not initially planned anyway. However, the good news is, as you said, now many organizations, whether they do it themselves, whether they work with managed service providers, regardless of the size of the organization, obviously, are probably in a better position in terms of securing the data, in terms of making sure the data is resilient, because one of the point of entry for a hacker is the remote users. You can access the network through your personal Wi-Fi, 4G, 5G. So there's a lot of entry points to the business that is increasing the overall surface attack for cyber activities, right, or cyber crime type of activities. Therefore, organizations as a result are in a better posture today than they might have been 2 years ago, as a result of deploying, secure remote access type solutions to allow remote users to access the network, whether, SSL VPN or deploying application like, Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, that type of things that allows employees to remain productive. Obviously, that comes with more added security type solutions on the prevention side, as well as on the, I would say, on the cure side, especially with backup, recovery, offsite backup to the cloud, deploying immutable storage type products, whether on-premise or leveraging what some of the hyperscalers are providing in terms of immutability from a storage standpoint.
Yeah, and yet, despite that, perhaps we've had the good news, maybe the bad news is that your survey seemed to uncover that a surprising amount of companies still don't have what one might call a comprehensive backup and recovery strategy. I mean, I've been involved in the storage industry a long time. I expect you have, and since day one, everyone was talking about backup and recovery, and yet we're apparently still at a situation where a lot of organizations don't have, as I say, a comprehensive plan as to how to, get back up and running. Does that surprise you?
Well, to some extent, yes, a bit, because obviously, as you know, if you look at Arcserve as a vendor, this vendor was funded started in the early 80s, so kind of 40 years ago, and anecdotally, obviously. But however, yeah, that I think, in terms of, what we see is yes, the backup, the recovery, the immutable storage, applying the 3-2-1-1 strategy when it comes down to backup and recovery is becoming, IT decision makers are coming back to it, because they realize that at some point they're going to get compromised. And obviously, the backup solutions, your backup data is what's going to allow you to kind of, minimize a ransomware attack. And more importantly, at the end of the day, is recover your data. So what we see is a bit of a shift back towards, my backup strategy. Can I recover? Can I meet my RTO? Can I meet my RPO? Where is my data stored? Yeah. Oh, it's on the NAS. Okay, well, very good. But does that offer immutability? In other words, if a ransomware would compromise the NAS, can you recover your backup data from the NAS? So still, there's still many companies out there that are not using immutability from a storage point of view. And if you're a smaller type of organization, investing in a on-premise, storage or immutable storage type product like we have at Arcserve with OneSafe can be, or if you're a 10, 20, user type of organization, the investment it can be a bit hefty. However, you have the hyperscalers now offering for quite some time, object lock store. So, in other words, you can get immutability from your hyperscaler provider, and that is becoming obviously more important. And one of the things we have seen as well, especially at the higher end, organization, kind of coming, I wouldn't say coming back, but paying, reinvigorating their tape backup strategy, because tape backup, as odd as it can sound, is, it's offline, it's air gapped, it's in a safe. Yes, there is obviously a bit of manual processes with, things can be automated these days anyway. However, we've seen, especially in highly regulated type of industries like finance and even manufacturing, where IT decision makers are like, well, we know we're going to get compromised. So how can we make sure we can recover our data? Yes, we do our backup. Yes, we might have on-premise immutable storage. However, if things comes to the worst, tape backup is, the last line of defense, so to say. And yes, it might take more time to recover the data than if you had your on-premise immutable storage solutions. However, the data is always offsite in a safe, and therefore, protecting, off grid, protecting against potential fires and whatnot. So it's obviously a way to know that you can recover your data at a certain point, 100%. And one of the things as well we see back to, ransomware is traditionally, backup and recovery and storage, especially from mid to enterprise organizations, sits within the infrastructure and operation teams. Yeah, they obviously all report to the CIO, but you have your security, the networking team, and then you have your, infra operation teams and so on. And what we've seen over the last 12 months, actually, interestingly enough, is the IT security decision makers, so the CISOs, IT security directors, managers, or whatever the business title is, you know, kind of starting to like, data's great. I've got my prevention, you know, security type solutions deployed. However, when it comes down to data resilience and data security, you know, I need to understand where the data is and how is it protected and can I recover it? So we see more and more the IT security professional within this mid to large enterprise type of organization, either being part of the, you know, strategies, working together with their infra and operation colleagues, or even, and we've seen it, you know, a few times over the last couple of months, is being the decision makers as well as the budget holders. So that's an interesting shift that basically, back to your question, says to us, well, actually, organization now realized or are realizing that, you know, backup and recovery and immutable storage is probably as critical as having, you know, a next generation firewall deployed at the perimeter, or using any type of, you know, security solutions that would prevent bad guys coming in. So we're starting to see that, you know, the investment and the thinking balancing, you know, which is great. Now, obviously, it's still fairly early days. That means in terms of rebalancing the investment and the thinking, therefore, you know, it's good to see that some of these organizations are in that, you know, process. But the more, obviously, the merrier from you know, from a data resilience standpoint, because at the end of the day, and we said it time after time after time over years, but, you know, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if you are ready, the chances of this organization recovering 100% of data are very high. And therefore, that will minimize the impact on the overall business operations. And, you know, they will not have to pay any hefty ransom, whether being £100,000 or £1 million or whatever it might be.
So it sounds like, as you say, people have begun to cotton on, but there's more education needed, as you say, because you know, traditionally the security guys would say, well, we've done all this, we're fine. And the storage guys might say, we've done all this, but there's maybe not that connection between the two to recognize that what they all do actually has a massive impact on what we might call the overall ransomware strategy. So that you think there's a lot more education work needs to be done on that point. So, and data resilience as a sort of term is a good way of describing, you know, that comprehensive approach.
Correct. I would say, you know, that's a very good point. And then they do you know, each group will do their stuff. They do a very good job, obviously, but, you know, they need to connect the dots. And data resilience is definitely one of them. Or from a technology point of view, I would say is, you know, immutability, again, whether it's non-storage storage solutions or you leveraging the cloud, is probably what's connecting the dot. It's all about securing the data, whether you are on premise, whether you are working remotely. It's like, we need to secure the data. And immutability is what is connecting, I would say, from a technology point of view, you know, these different groups to achieve, as you said very rightly, you know, data resilience. And one of the points you made earlier, actually, in terms of, you know, how to best, you know, prevent ransomware compromising your network. And we mentioned the human element, obviously, but again, training, you know, cybersecurity awareness type training is obviously key. You cannot assume that, you know, people will be aware of the latest, you know, spoofing type of techniques or phishing and so on and so forth. And even if you were aware of all of these things, you could be in a mindset on a specific day where, you know, you, for whatever reason, you might not pay attention, and you might be clicking on you know, on the link that you shouldn't. And again, you know, the mingling of your, especially with, you know, remote working, or the remote hybrid approach, or the hybrid approach to work, where you could be in the office or working remotely, you might be using personal devices. So that means your personal space, so to say, or is mingling with your professional environment. and you might be, accessing your personal email while doing work, and it's, that people do that, and then you are outside, let's say the network, you are within your private space. However, the laptop you might be using might get compromised. That laptop might connect to the network at some point, and you could end up breaching the network. So that means, or breaching the organization. So training is important as much as testing obviously, but regular training is key, and there's so much you can do obviously. However, the human element is, again, sometimes, I wouldn't say forgotten, but underestimated, and therefore, again, small, one of the, sometimes the kind of, thinking we see from some of these small organizations, that, wow, a small business, who cares? Well, doesn't matter. You have data, whatever that data is has value. Therefore, you need to make sure that, you train your people. And obviously, there's a lot of organization out there. I mean, could be as simple as, if you're a medium-sized organization or an SMB, you work with an MSP, a managed service provider. They'll be able to, give, train your employees either on a quarterly basis or annual basis for a pretty minimum fee. So they are solutions, definitely, from a training point of view.
And just in terms of what Arcserve has been up to recently in this space, I believe you've expanded the N series, and I think the 3S, well, a certain 3S's, I think simplicity, scalability, and security are the sort of mantra around there. Can you just sort of enlarge on that, what you've done and why?
Yeah, sure. The N series is actually, so Arcserve do offer obviously backup and recovery as a software and appliance base. So we have various models of appliances, and the N series is the latest we added onto the product range. So to say, this is for very large environments. We're leveraging actually not only the Arcserve, backup and recovery features, but we are offering, as part of the features, the Sophos Interceptex Advanced or Advanced Interceptex, server, antivirus type of agent as part of our features. And the third pillar is we are leveraging, the Nutanix, scale out, storage technology. So then we can protect, very large set of data in very large environments. And that's where the N series comes and complement our X series, as well as our 9000 series type of appliances. So it really, depending on the customer requirements in terms of the, the data, the amount of data they need to store, whether they're using Nutanix themselves or not, to enable them to simplify their overall, backup and recovery strategies. And that's obviously the N series is a great add-on to the product line, so to say, for these larger type of environments where they might be using Nutanix actually. But the N series, whether you use Nutanix or not, can be deployed in your environment. It's just we're leveraging their storage infrastructure that allows organization to have a scale-out approach to their, secondary data and backup data, shall I say, strategy, of course. Yeah.
And I think as well, you've expanded the OneSafe series recently. So can you just give us a bit of a flavor of what you've done there?
Correct. I mean, we back in March 2021, actually, Arcserve and StorageCraft merged, so two backup and recovery vendors came together. And one of the things that, StorageCraft brought onto the table to the new Arcserve, it's been 1 year now, so is immutable on-premise storage. And the product is OneSafe. It's to make it simple, is a NAS that leverage, it's an object store. So it's an object-based type of storage that is scale out. So we've seen, obviously, because of what we discussed actually earlier on today, ransomware being such an obviously a concern for and a problem for many organizations. Immutability is one way of protecting your data, to guarantee 100% recoverability. And therefore, what we have launched recently is a new appliance model for our OneSafe immutable storage product. So it's the 4500 series, and it can, accommodate about 216 terabyte of raw data. And obviously that appliance will offer enterprise type features like, inline deduplication, the compression, obviously the encryption of data at rest are very important. And that's why many organizations are adopting this technology, whether with the Arcserve product or with their existing, backup and recovery vendor, because it's a NAS that supports SMB and NFS. So it could be deployed with alongside any other type of, let's say, backup and recovery vendor. But the key, I would say, what is important with OneSafe is, or the new series we launched a couple of weeks ago, is adding in a non-disrupting fashion, adding immutability to your overall backup and recovery strategy. Yeah, and that's why organizations are really considering immutability, whether being on-prem or in the cloud, as we said before. But obviously with on-prem solution like OneSafe, the recovery speed is obviously much faster because the appliance or the appliances are obviously deployed on your network. Or if you have a distributed type of environment, you could have multiple OneSafes, let's say one in London, one in Manchester, and then one in Edinburgh, and they could replicate one to another bi-directionally as well. So you are increasing your overall data resilience because you can have redundancy of your backup data in various locations if that's what you have. Or if you're working again with a managed service provider, you could as well replicate your data from your data center onto their own data center to make sure that the data is replicated and therefore stored in a different location. So that's what OneSafe is about.
And just back to the survey quickly, I was intrigued because I think one of your questions or the answers to the question was that the IT decision makers you surveyed thought or wanted government to do more to do with ransomware. I'm slightly intrigued as to why they think government should be responsible, and what did they give you any idea as to how they think governments, what role governments, can fulfill, if you like it, in the scenario?
Yeah, I think definitely. I would say governments, around the world have a key role to play because, they are obviously serving citizens of a specific, country. Therefore, at the end of the day, employees are human beings to start with. So if governments can train and have, awareness campaigns around cybersecurity to their people as citizens, will definitely help and add more awareness around the risks. So then when you are, and we said, your personal space is definitely more and more coming with your professional space. So if you as an individual, you are, receiving some sort of awareness type communication or documentation from governments, then obviously, the chances of employees being more educated as a result will be higher. And another reason is obviously, organizations from the private sector, do work for governments. So that means it's in the interest of any governments out there to really, again, train, educate, make organization aware of all the potential issues, because by compromising a private sector organization, maybe a governmental entity might get compromised as a result. So it is definitely in their interest. And what we've seen in the UK, for example, I don't know if you had a chance to visit InfoSecurity UK back in June this year, but the National Cybersecurity Center had a booth there. And then when you look at all the initiatives they have in terms of in terms of best practices and so on and so forth, is very good content, can be very helpful. Now, the question I have is, how many IT decision makers are aware of this great content? Because, let's say we were talking about training, training your employees, making them aware. Obviously, you have to create content. Things don't happen overnight. a bit of work that is required. Well, now, if you look at what the National Cybersecurity Center, in the UK is producing, there's a lot of good content. So that's something, if an IT decision maker can utilize to train his or hers, but the organization employees, with awareness type of, content and so on and so forth. So we definitely see, government stepping in. I mean, I was attending another IT security event similar to InfoSec in France back in June as well. And, the French police were exhibiting there. The equivalent of the NCSC was there as well. And they even, they have these, like the NCSC, some beautiful documents with great content, and say, well, here you go, Mr. Vendor or any organization, use it, put your own logo, send it to your own people, so they are becoming more and more, obviously, proactive. When you look at as well, they're getting more visibility. What's getting more visibility as well is, the cyber police forces, whether it's in the UK or in France or in the US, they get more visibility. So that means, the national security of countries, especially with, what's happening, the kind of east side of Europe, is definitely, it's adding more threats. And from a cyber point of view, and, whether you're a public sector type of organization or a private sector type of organization, you will be targeted. And that means, as a whole, a country, a state has to make sure that they protect every single individual, or help protecting every single individual, every single organization, being public or private, because as today it's all interconnected, right? And as we said, you got private sector, companies, working for public type of organizations, and that could be a conduit to an attack to compromise a specific ministry or whatever it might be. So obviously, it's in government interest to really become more proactive in terms of all of these, cybersecurity challenges at the citizen level, but that will cascade, that will come to the workplace, and obviously helping, organizations with best practices and awareness type of activities and so on and so forth can only help. Can they do more? Not for me to say, but when you look at, again, I will refer to the, because I think there's great content there on the national cybersecurity center.gov.uk, so ncsc.gov.uk. There's some really good content there. So I would say to these IT decision makers, go there, leverage what we need. A lot of work has been done. Don't reinvent the wheel, and then use that to train your employees.
Okay, and maybe just to finish, perhaps slightly unfair, but are you an optimist or a pessimist? I mean, clearly the bad guys, the hackers, are always going to be there looking for ever new ways to part us from our money or whatever it happens to be. Do you think with this focus on data resilience and education stuff, people will get much better, and therefore security breaches will lessen, or how would you see, or will we always just have this sort of constant battle, and therefore where we're at now is about as good as it gets? Or do you think there's room for improvement, and we will make the improvement?
Yeah, I mean, the people are making, organizations are making improvement, that's for sure. And then at the end of the day, we need, when you look at, the digitalization of our industry, of the industry, of our society, we are moving forward. Technology is a great enabler to improve the way we live in, and to respond maybe to some external elements that we don't manage or whatnot. And as a result, yes, organization will obviously get better at, will strengthen their overall data resilience, will improve their overall data resilience. However, they will always be the bad guys, because, there's so much, at the end of the day, it's so much money at stake there, that, some people are really making an awful amount of money by breaching organizations, stealing data, encrypting data with ransomware or whatnot. So it's a bit, I mean, I wouldn't want to make the analogy with, with COVID or whatnot, but it's like, the flu, we know that the flu is there, it's not going to be there. Does that mean that you cannot go out and enjoy life? No, you do, but you are taking precautious measures as well, if you do get, a bug or something, as a human being, then you might take your tablets, you might do inhalations and so forth. So there's always cure that will help you to recover very quickly and get back on your two feet. So my view is, yes, we organizations are getting better, are getting stronger. Are they always going to be able to recover the data? Well, to be, question mark. However, as we move forward, they are in a much better situation. Are the bad guys going to go away? No, they won't. No, they won't. However, it's how to really mitigate the risk as much as you can with all your prevention type of, security solutions. But then, very importantly, rebalance your thinking, rebalance your investment with the cure. In that case, immutable storage, backup, recovery, and what comes with it.
Well, that's brilliant. I mean, I've really enjoyed chatting to you today, Florian, and thank you so much for your time. So, yeah, all the best. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the weekend.